Vital not-for-profits and social enterprises need reliable cash and not just goodwill. Can these purpose-led organisations borrow proven tools from the for-profit world without losing their soul? Or are there better models entirely? My guest today, Jackie Riddell, has led at the ABC, SBS, Barangaroo, the Arts Gallery of New South Wales, the CBAA, and in recent times, an environmental not-for-profit. Jackie, what pulled you into this third sector after a long arts and media-focused career?
Hi, Michael. I'm not sure I really knew that there was a third sector, to be honest. I just follow my heart when I'm coming to work decisions. And in the case of joining Take 3 for the Sea, which was an environmental charity, not-for-profit, I was really passionate about the ocean and climate change and the environment. And I thought, let me use my skills for good, not evil, at this stage of my career, and just really dive into whether I could help move the needle on the environment.
So there's a direct line between what you felt personally and the capacity or potential to make an impact on that particular issue with Take 3.
Absolutely. I'm at the point in my career where I've done a lot. I've got a lot of experience and capability. And I thought, well, I could go and work for a corporate and, make another few bucks to put in for my superannuation, or I could take those skills and capability and use them for a really purposeful thing, kind of as a way to conclude my career, I guess.
I think a lot of people think the same thing. So where do the not-for-profits and the social enterprise sector make the most impact currently?
That's a big question. I mean, society wouldn't be what it is without not-for-profits, for sure. Did you know in Australia there's over 60,000 charities, and that has its pros and its cons. But, many of those charities are doing such essential work that can't be done by governments, can't be done by businesses. So we wouldn't have a functioning society without charities, without the not-for-profit sector. But at the same time, 60,000 charities in a small country like Australia is a lot of charities competing for the same kind of funding and resource and impact. So, not every charity is as successful as the big ones.
I think it goes to the heart of the opportunities and challenges in front, because a lot of good people doing a lot of good things, chasing a limited amount of support, either from government.
Yeah. There's a lot of passionate people. So there's different kinds of charities, clearly, different kinds of not-for-profits. There's the big ones that kind of do quasi-government work and, perform functions that we really need as a society. And then there's, medium-sized ones that have more capability but are maybe still more ideologically driven. And then there's the type of not-for-profit I was working for, which is a really, really tiny but incredibly passionate and principled bunch of people who just set out to change the world. They thought, well, someone's got to do it, so let's do it. The passion is one thing, but ultimately what I now understand is that passion only gets you so far. You also need to build the capability to be able to amplify that passion into something meaningful.
Yeah, to keep delivering the good that you want to deliver, you have to be sustainable financially. And
absolutely.
And this is, I guess it's at the heart of our discussion today about how far you can move away from being a pure charity and not-for-profit with all the good intentions towards being a fully fledged business. Somewhere in between the two is some disciplines that they could learn off each other, but create a more sustainable third sector, which it's an interesting term, and we'll get to the fourth sector. We've had a bit of exposure to, and I think it starts to bridge that gap. Just overall, you mentioned 60,000 charities, explosive growth, particularly in the last few decades. But how do you see, from a financial resilience point of view, the sector right now? Is that too many charities? Are there too many that are struggling? What's your take on the?
Yeah, absolutely. There's too many charities for sure. It's great that people think I'm going to do something about, the problems of the world and start up a charity. Great, good on them. But unfortunately, there's just too many of the same kind of things competing for the same resources. And without scale, you really can't survive. I was looking at the of the Charities report in preparation for our discussion today. And they talk about a whole subset of charities, which is many, many charities, maybe 10,000 charities, which are micro. So, one to 5 employees surviving on, the breadcrumbs that are thrown at them, and how that's not really at all sustainable. And it's not actually very effective for the charities as well. Like, I think they get into this, they keep trying to be effective, but if they're not actually effective in their mission, then you really have to question, why are you pursuing that? So, there's too many charities just in the environmental sector that I was a part of. Briefly, I might add. So I really don't know everything about the NGO world, and I'm still learning myself. But in the environmental space, there were 10 or 15 similar charities of similar scale with the similar challenges. So there's definitely something to be said for consolidation and amalgamation. And I know we want to get on and chat about that. But definitely things could be structured more effectively to make those charities more effective for Australia.
Yeah. It's interesting. I think there's a parallel between the small business sector and the charity sector. A lot of, out of 2.6 million SMEs in Australia, 1.6 or thereabouts million of them, so 60%, zero employee businesses. Whether you call them a business, but they're people doing something that maybe they're contractors, maybe they've got a side hustle, but it's a challenge. And I think there are some of those that, and I suspect the same in the not-for-profit social enterprise sector, where someone's got a tiny niche and they're doing something that's important to them, and that they've created a sustainable model. But overall for the sector, the question is, there's a lot of administration costs in running any small business or any small charity or any small social enterprise.
Absolutely. But I think also, some of those individuals with a passion do really make it. And, a great example to call on, and someone that I know well now, is Clean Up Australia. So that was a bunch of people who basically said, we're going to sort this out. We're going to clean up Australia. One founder in particular, a very strong individual, and they just pushed and carried that along. And today it's a very effective, successful organisation that's well grounded financially. It's got a fantastic board, fantastic chair, like really successful and stable organisation. So out of the many organisations that start up and want to do something, certainly some thrive. And that's the same with business, I'm sure, is that, there's many startups and only a few success stories, but you have to have those multiple startups to get the success stories at the end, don't you?
And I think also, there's a place, I'm a really strong believer that there's a place for individuals doing their thing that don't want to necessarily scale, and they find something that works for them. But that's not what we're chatting about. And we've seen the numbers on that graph to get to 60,000 charities today is a very long flat line for decades and decades, and then it explodes in, I think it was from the start, from perhaps the 80s, and it skyrockets up. So on financial sustainability or viability, what do you think there's any particular for-profit tools or approaches or disciplines that should be adopted more broadly?
Absolutely. In fact, are being adopted. Successful charities that use business models. So when I joined the charity Take 3 for the Sea, it was a fantastic idea, a really powerful concept about taking 3 pieces of rubbish off the beach or the park and stopping it getting into the ocean. Simple idea, really simple idea. And I was really attracted to it. But then I started there and I realised it was an idea without a business model. And so that's fundamentally what an organisation needs to survive, as a way to get income. And there were real challenges in achieving that because the business model was lacking. So fundamentally, you need a way of making money. So that's very like a business in that, you've got to go into this thinking, how are we going to make money to support this passion? And then on top of that, all of the capabilities of a modern business, such as customer relationship management systems and promotion and marketing and building websites and e-commerce operations, governance, full governance that you would require on a business because you're dealing with money and reputation. And so all of those things are equally as needed in a not-for-profit as they are in a business. And successful not-for-profits are really leaning into that and making sure that they have all that capability.
Yeah, it's run like a business. Get the right people.
Yeah. Run like a business. It just happens to be the shareholders are, I guess, community.
Yeah. But there's an underlying recognition that we don't want to blow this thing up and not deliver on the potential because we're over-reliant on government funding, which is fickle, or over-reliant on one or two benefactors or donors.
Yeah, I think they're really not at odds. They're very compatible. In fact, every not-for-profit just needs all those capabilities, whether they're business capabilities or not, they're just professional capabilities.
I've wondered whether there's been a movement away from corporate culture, and I want to be on a board. I want to do some good as a bit of a rebound to having worked in a role where maybe were rewarded well, but didn't quite feel you were delivering on anything more than just shareholder value or a personal.
Of course, yeah. There's a lot of purpose seeking, isn't there? And certainly I've experienced that in the boards that I've worked with and on. People genuinely are generous and they want to give back and they want to do what they can. And that is, for many people, many corporate life, that involves, advising or getting on a board or, providing your time for free to assist a charity to become a bigger and more effective.
Yeah. Do you think that there's a translation of that experience in corporate immediately to a not-for-profit?
Yeah, that's a tricky one because often people in corporate settings look to join boards. So that's a governance role, and that's not a hands-on business role. And I've seen that be a struggle for people actually, because you might be the director of a large division or a CEO in a business, and then you come onto a board where you're not responsible for the operation of the place, and then you have big ideas and aspirations for this tiny little charity that really can't meet your expectations at a capability level. And that can be quite problematic. I've seen that in numerous settings, actually. So learning how to be good at governance is pretty important if you want to step into that space. Equally, if you're, and I was probably in this situation a bit, I was quite an experienced large manager, dealt with a lot of strategy, big teams, big leadership stuff. And then stepping into it was 3 people really, or 4 people, and no money to work with, I was like, I don't know if I can be effective here because I'm used to calling the shots. And I'd say, okay, let's do this. I think we need to do this. And I'd look around and like, okay, well, I'll be doing that, I guess. And that was quite a change for me. And I think that is an issue, sort of meeting all this amazing corporate and government and capability and experience, and how best to help smaller charities to grow, because there's a big gap in sort of expectation and operation.
Yeah, it's the resources just aren't on tap, and so maybe it's a bit of tempering of aspirations, because I'd say most of them are wanting to do the right thing, but maybe it's go slow, or maybe it's go back to your funding base or your business model and really revisit that so that you've got you can grow the business incrementally if you need.
Absolutely. And I think governance is really critical as well. And the more governance skills that are developed in business, in corporate life, the better we'll all be. So learning how to be good at governance, because the governance is like the shelter that provides for the growth to come underneath. It's like the big bush that the little seedling can come up from. Yeah. And without good governance, the seedlings can't grow.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that in a smaller organisation they could all do with governance, that board level thinking on the reason we're in business and what resources we're going to make available. And there's a lot of doing the do, and that's a trap for small business and small business owners generally, is that you're so busy that you can forget, and it applies equally.
Absolutely.
In the third sector. Social enterprises of a part, a part of the charity not-for-profit sector. I had some personal experience with a social enterprise. We bought an operating business to support a charity or a not-for-profit. Do you see that as an opportunity as a long-term funding, part of the funding mix for a not-for-profit or a charity to buy an operating business that produces some profits that you can plough back into the business or the cause that you're chasing?
I guess so. I have to say I'm not an expert at all in, that kind of thing. So what I say is just my own opinion here, but potentially I've seen that working in some settings. So one of my roles that I currently do is I'm involved with community broadcasting, which I know is very dear to your heart as well, Michael.
Yes,
we love
it
our
is.
community radio, and I'm the president of the Community Broadcasting Association, and 450 stations across the country. Some of them are doing that social enterprise route, with mixed success, I have to say. For example, one of the stations, I think in the Northern Territory, has a cafe associated with their station. It's partly to support the community and provide a community hub, which is very much on mission, but also hopefully to return a bit of income. So yes, potentially, but I think it's very high risk. And again, coming back to capability, most charities are not going to be in a great position to know how to start a business, to be successful, to then feed money back into the charity.
Yeah. I mean, I was involved with one, it was maybe 12, 14 years ago. It was a mental health organisation out of the UK. UK is very progressive on a lot of things. The social enterprise model had been more developed there. And we went out of our way to find, and it was with Social Ventures Australia. If you took a long-term view, it was actually about capability building, because we found a business, we bought it, and for 3 years we ran it. The outgoing owner of the business, his wife was bipolar, and so he was sympathetic to what the charity and the not-for-profit was, the work they were doing. And we had this particular business that we looked at tens and tens of businesses that were probably making a little bit of money, enough to justify the investment, but weren't going to be good places for people recovering or getting treatment for mental health to work in. So we bought a bonsai farm up in the Dandenongs, and we bought the real estate and we ran the business. But over 3 years, we had some really experienced people on the board. We sold the business to another larger, but the learnings in there were pretty profound, and it was it's hard to run an operating business. But we learn a lot, and I think with the number of baby boomer businesses out there that are going to be coming up for sale, I think there's the opportunity to kind of go back. And I know there are other examples.
It is a more effective way to look at it. So rather than a charity buying or starting up a business in the hope of making money, it's a long, hard road, that one. And, the charity is not going to be the best person to operate a business because they don't have that capability necessarily. But there are examples of businesses setting up charities to become social enterprises, to give back to community. And I think that's a really viable way to go. Not only to create a charity, because actually we don't need more charities in Australia, so we were 60,000, but maybe to partner with a charity who, fits your mindset, your view on life. And wouldn't that be an amazing lifeline for the charity and, a way of you giving back and doing good?
Yeah, no, because there are a lot of good people that do want to help, and connecting that this successful business with a charity or a cause that they're passionate about is
absolutely, and one that they can not only provide funding to, which is incredibly welcome and necessary, but also expertise and advice and guidance, like to be able to kind of adopt a charity and really be their patron, be their champion would be really powerful for the charity and also really fulfilling for the business, I would have thought.
Yeah, and both continue to do their thing, but there's some cooperation. It leads to, do you see the opportunity for mergers and acquisitions in the not-for-profit charity sector? Most charities have a base of cost, and they have compliance issues, and they have things that whether you're turning over 50,000 or 500 or 5 million, you've still got these baseload costs that can cripple the smaller ones. So is there an opportunity to merge
There absolutely is. I don't think it would be called acquisitions. It would be called, mergers or partnerships or collaborations.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, to make 60,000 charities sustainable, it's not going to happen. So, where is there commonality? Where can people work together? And there could be really imaginative and inventive structures to enable that. It doesn't just have to be one takes over another. But I think there are, again, like with everything, there are great opportunities and immense challenges with that as well. One of the challenges in the not-for-profit space is the founding ideology. So often people have a very clear idea of what they want their charity to do. And if you are looking at getting together with a different set of ideology, sometimes that doesn't fit. So you sort of have to work out how to blend organisations from the very top, from the founders, from the board, through to the operations. And maybe there are models where you don't blend, but you do share back end, for instance. And that's certainly a really great thing to pursue because, as you say, the costs are the costs. It's not so much the cost, it's also the capability. Like just one of the things I struggled with running a tiny organisation was a lack of HR support. So I had to be the HR manager as well, which, I'm sure small business owners will be nodding furiously and going, yep, that's me as well, because that's life, running a small organisation. But just to have some professional HR support available, not all the time, maybe not full time, but, one day a week. And if that was shared with 3 other charities and we all had the same issues basically and work under the same legislation, that would have been really helpful. So lots of ways to collaborate, maybe not in a traditional merging.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at any business, people, the cost of people or the investment in people is always the biggest expense. And so managing them, getting more from them, avoiding any HR issues is paramount because that's...
Yeah, absolutely.
You got to have people that are engaged and feel productive and safe, and there's a lot going on.
But we can do much more with collaboration for sure. And one of the examples I'll give here is in community broadcasting. One of the issues that every radio station faces is tech support. And the tech in a radio station is usually an old bloke who's been knocking around the station for 40 or 50 years and has finally gone, I've had enough, I've got to retire. And then the station is left without any tech support. So what we've done with the CBAA is we've piloted a program in WA where we employ the tech support to support about 5 or 6 stations so that they're all sharing that support, but they're well supported into the future. And it's that kind of model that charities could really look to employ as well, like getting together on certain fronts to employ or provide the supports that they require.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine the kit is the same across a lot of those stations, the desk, the equipment, but it's that thinking, I think it's at a governance level where everyone wants to do the right thing, everyone's engaged in their local thing, but you've got to look outside and say, how are other organisations doing it differently? What can I learn from, as much as we're passionate about our thing and our business, our station, our charity, there's always more to learn by looking over the fence. And so that, you've got to run a tight ship, but you've also got to invest time and energy and money in finding out how do we make ourselves sustainable.
Yeah, it all comes back to revenue, really, doesn't it? You've got to have a sustainable revenue pipeline or you're in deep doo-doo. Yeah,
and it just sharing stories where things have been wound up, maybe that's kind of like, it's a bit dramatic, but it's terrible to see when not a perfectly viable, but an important institution in a community like a radio station or a charity or some service, falls by the wayside because they didn't recruit or they didn't build in some exit planning or some succession planning, or they
didn't see the future coming. In the case of media, there's a lot of towns now, quite large towns even, that are without any local media because they simply can't survive. The local newspapers had to shut down. They don't have the revenue, even though the community is crying out for it still. But the revenue is what ends up bringing them down.
Yeah, and there are many examples of businesses that have transitioned, but it's what is that missing link there for them? And maybe it's fresh talent that or guidance to say, well, we used to be a printed newspaper or magazine. Now we need to be online. And towards that, there's the tech around it. It's all very dual, but
yeah.
The building in that succession and is so vital. I think the fourth sector, B Corps, and have you had much exposure to that? They term it as like a hybrid.
Yeah, I mean, I'm only as a consumer, I can see that area sort of burgeoning and growing. Again, I didn't really understand the terminology before, but I can see what's happening there. Yes, I think, look, my view on that is that as everything, there's pros and cons, but it's absolutely fantastic that businesses are leaning into social responsibility. That's really paramount. And why not? I mean, they should. I mean, they're a part of society. They're a part of our, how we are as humans. Businesses need to pull their weight as well and do the right thing. Absolutely. I guess the danger or downside is that it can be a bit of what we call in the biz greenwashing or sort of you do it for brand purposes rather than for meaningful purposes. But, I really don't think that the B Corps that I've engaged with, they are all doing it for the right reasons. It helps that you can then say you're a B Corp. That's a good thing as well, but why not?
Yeah.
But they're all driven by the fact that they want to do the best that they can for community and the environment.
It's quite a process to get certified as a B Corp, and
absolutely,
it probably weeds out those that want a quick bit of, a quick opportunity to promote themselves as doing good.
Yeah, and when I've spoken with the CEOs of companies that have gone through the B Corp process, they say it's actually really soul-searching for the business. It makes them rethink a lot of things, not just that they thought they were getting into, like, for the social good and environmental good, but they suddenly go, oh, hang on, why have we been doing that this way, and is there a better way to do it? So, yeah, I think those anything that encourage businesses to move in the right direction is a good thing.
Yeah, and to check that this is what we want to do. It's okay if you don't want to meet those ongoing obligations and compliance. That's a good thing. That program should have high standards if it's on what it aspires.
Yeah, and wouldn't it be great if ideally it becomes the norm to operate ethically and sustainably, and that's just expected of the business.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's where consumers can force the issue a bit, or communities can force the issue a bit. If you had to pick the ideal board for if you got involved in another not-for-profit, what would you be looking at in terms of, at that governance level, the type of people and experience that you think would be relevant and suitable to take to scale a not-for-profit?
I think ideally for me, I'd be looking for a mid-sized organisation for the start. Like, I think getting in a tiny organisation in a governance role is really challenging. And good on people that do that. It's fantastic. I've certainly done that before, but I think for me to be effective, the organisation needs to be at a certain point, have certain scale, have enough revenue to then be able to start to shape it. So that's definitely what I'd be looking for is something that, has 3 years of revenue available, has a clear business model, so where they can get the money, not just sort of putting the begging bowl out and scratching around for what you can get, living very hand to mouth. But, there are other people at a different stage of their life and career that can really help those small organisations. So but I think probably governance is a bit different at that level as well.
But yeah, that's reflective what you just said there. So you might go again on a not-for-profit. You'd want your due diligence might be different.
Absolutely, yeah.
You'd want to make sure that you could execute on. I sound like a real corporate person, but you got to execute. You've got to have a plan. You got to have the funds and resources and support to be able to deliver it.
Yeah, I wrote a LinkedIn post about this when I left Take 3, actually, and how it was just the wrong job for me. And I got carried away with the story, and I hadn't done enough thinking about what the reality would look like. And the story was, we're going to save the animals in the ocean. We're going to stop plastic getting into the ocean. We're going to save the environment. And what's not to like about that story? Yeah, I'm signed up for that. But then how am I actually going to do that? I'm going to be running a small organization with no resources and no revenue. Am I actually going to be able to deliver the story? And I realized with a lot of self-reflection that, I bought the story, but not the reality of the job. And I think that's critical. And I made that point in the LinkedIn post I did, that's critical when you're making a job decision, but it's also critical when you're making a decision about, is this the right place that I can help? Can my business help this other charity or business? You really have to ask yourself those questions, not just get carried away by the exciting story.
Yeah, the vision, the purpose, all wonderful, but you don't want to go down that road and realize that you've signed on for something that's doesn't suit you. It might suit somebody else.
Yeah, that's right. Or that you're not going to actually be able to contribute effectively to because your skills are what that organisation needs. Or you're at a different place, skill and capability wise.
Yeah, we've all made those decisions. You have to look at it as individually capability building at a sector level capability building. So it looks like there's been a trend in a massive growth of the charities not-for-profit sector, which is a good thing. But however you measure impact, I think there's a lot of tiny ones, and maybe some of those will grow. But yeah, it's hard though, isn't it? Which issues do you pick to? Is it up to the individual driver or founder of a charity to do everything they can, or is it at a higher policy level? We want to support particular.
Yeah, well, I think it's all of those, isn't it? And it's also looking at the funding. So looking at the Charities report reminded me that with charities in Australia, over 50% of their funding comes from government.
Yeah.
So that's the bedrock. And then the next biggest chunk of funding is from philanthropy. So those are the two things that you really got to work on. Can I sustain this organisation on government grants, and what does that look like, and which government grants am I going for, and how do I get those, and how do I build philanthropy? Now, philanthropy is a massive opportunity for every charity. There's no doubt about it. We're going through the largest intergenerational wealth transfer ever as we speak. There's a lot of money out there, but getting it is really difficult. So how do you open up philanthropic opportunities, allowing for people who have good intentions and resources to be able to come on board and support you? Now, what's critical there is that you have some capability, because no philanthropist in their right mind is going to give you a blank check if you actually can't spend the money effectively. So it's a bit of a catch-22, but it's definitely the area of major growth for charities.
Yeah, it's forcing probably not dissimilar to going to the bank for a loan or to venture capitalists for some funding. You've got to have a great pitch. You've got to
have a great pitch. You've got to be able to deliver it. Yeah. You've got to build trust that you know what you're doing and you can actually get the job done.
Your great idea may well be a great idea, and your purpose may be wonderful and needed, but if you can't convince the benefactors, whoever that might be, then it's going to stay in the ground. Or
absolutely, yeah. But I know there's a lot of work at a peak body level, across government as well, about how to create a more sustainable safety net for charities.
Yeah.
So a lot of thinking going into that. More is welcome, of course, but really interesting to see how the charity sector can kind of navigate the next wee while. COVID had a big impact on charities on two fronts. Well, primarily that I can think about, revenue for one. So revenue dropped. People's capacity to give money to charities has dropped as a result of COVID. And also volunteering. The volunteering is on a major slide and exacerbated post-COVID. And those two things are pretty important for any not-for-profit. And so how are we going to navigate that? How are we going to remake these organisations so that they're not so reliant on volunteering and then, they've got more resources to be able to do their jobs?
Get better at pitching to volunteers as well. Like that's, it's, I've been involved in sports clubs and it's like, we need someone to run the bar on Thursday night, and it's like, you'll do. It's not, there's a lot of professionalism that could be brought to volunteering and sharing the load. We're running up to that time. You mentioned one article you'd written on LinkedIn. Was that under the banner of accidental retirement, or was that another?
I've coined this phrase. I'm going to trademark it, my accidental retirement. And now when I get asked that question, in a social setting, and so what do you do? And then I'm trying to shorten my story, but it's basically, well, I'm accidentally retired. No, I've written quite a bit about that on LinkedIn, actually, and it's had a really great impact. Yeah. People have been really coming out of the woodwork talking about their experience of accidental retirement, because in my case, I've had a really interesting career, loved every job I've done, and I found myself sort of running right off the end of the treadmill. My legs are still going, but there's no treadmill underneath me because there's no job for me to do. And I'm like, oh, well, that must be it. I must be retired. And of course, I'm not really retired. I'm actually busier than ever doing all sorts of random things that we'll talk about another day. It's just that idea that you sort of get to your late 50s and suddenly you've got all this experience and capability, but it's difficult to find where to place that sometimes. And it seems like there's a lot of other people who are feeling the same way. So, maybe we'll think up some accidental retirement website or start talking about it a bit more.
It's a wasted talent pool opportunity for the small business sector, for everybody. So, we'll put a link to that. Just in closing out, and in terms of if suddenly someone offered you the job as the head of the federal small business department up in Canberra, and given your breadth of experience, what were the couple of things you'd do to revitalise? I normally talk about in terms of the small business sector, but I'll make an exception here. So to revitalise the charity not-for-profit sector, what would you do at a policy level if you could pick a couple of things with big impact?
Oh, gosh, what a big question to ask me at the end. I'm going to say my first answer would be I wouldn't take the job because I don't want to live in Canberra. I love Canberra. I spend a lot of time there, but I don't want to live there. My second answer would be policy. So there's something about what we were talking about earlier about platforms for success. There's got to be something the government can do to stitch together all of the basic requirements for charities to thrive. I think there's something in that would probably be the first thing I'd advocate for, is the getting together of the sector to try and work out how to be really great at the basics so that they can be really fantastic at their particular path.
So we're not competing with each other. We should be sharing.
Yeah. And this may already exist, to be honest. But, what about, for instance, at Take 3, we spent a lot of time trying to work out a CRM system to put in to manage our contacts with all our stakeholders. I mean, that was 6 months of work to try and work out which might be the best one. Now, what about if someone came to us and said, your size, what you want to do, here's the best CRM system, here you go, plug and play. That would have saved us so much time, so much energy. There's just some basic things, like finance systems, CRM systems, HR systems that could be provided to enable the charity to do the work it wants to do rather than to spend all its time doing that sort of work.
Yeah, vendor selection or choosing software.
Yeah. Like a charity in a box, plug and play. Stick it in, then you can go on and be passionate and enthusiastic. That's the thing, we spent most of our time worrying about systems and finance and HR and not worrying about plastic in the ocean. And that's what we were there to do. So it's how you can minimize that stuff and maximize what you're there to do.
And no question, the technology, the platforms exist to do it. And somebody's already nailed how to do it. And you've got to look at what others are doing, because someone will have it working fine. Then you can get back to the core business of whatever it might be.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right, Jackie Riddell, that's been fun. Thanks so much for your time. Good luck with your whatever the next steps are with the CV.
Thank you. It's great to be a part of media still and doing what I love in community broadcasting. It's my number one passion. Support your local community broadcaster. Bye, Michael.
Thanks so much, Jackie. Take care.